Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to introduce as keynote speaker at this fifth IISS Fullerton Forum, the Shangri-La Dialogue Sherpa meeting, Malaysia's Minister of Defence, Datuk Sri Hishamuddin Tun Hussein. Datuk Sri Hishamuddin has been Minister of Defence since May 2013, and in that capacity has spoken at the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue 4 times, thereby ensuring that Malaysia's voice has been heard consistently and clearly. Having risen through the ranks of the United Malays National Organisation Youth Wing, in 1995 he was elected to the Federal Parliament. He became leader of UMNO Youth in 1998 and Minister for Education in 2004. In 2009, Datuk Sri Hishamuddin became a Vice President of UMNO and Minister of Home Affairs. In 2013, he played a key role in the Malaysian government's response to the incursion into Sabah by a large armed group from the southern Philippines, the Lahut Datu crisis. As acting Transport Minister, he also played a central role in Malaysia's response to the disappearance of Flight MH370 in March 2014. As Minister of Defence, Datuk Sri Hishamuddin has faced multiple challenges. These have included the need to continue the process of modernising the Malaysian armed forces at a time of significant security challenges and strategic uncertainty. In his plenary address at the 2016 Shangri-La Dialogue, the Minister particularly emphasised the threat posed by the so-called Islamic State and the way that uncertainty over China's future trajectory had the potential to provoke military competition in the region. As head of a major regional country's defence establishment, which is grappling with the big questions posed by the changing regional balance of power and a diverse range of non-conventional threats, Datuk Sri Hishamuddin is particularly well equipped to deliver this keynote address to the 5th IISS Fullerton Forum. Minister, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your keynote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me begin by thanking the IISS for according me the honor of delivering the keynote address for the 2017 Fullerton Forum. I like to think that this makes the opening act for the main show, this year's Shangri-La Dialogue, which I'm sure everyone is looking forward to. And the setting this morning is much more cozier and at a time which is not so cozy. The phrase, "we are at a crossroads," has become something of a cliche these days. It is often applied time and time again to a myriad of situations, but the fact is that the world is now on the cusp of great changes. The tumultuous events of 2016, including the outcome of the Brexit vote and the tumultuous debates leading to the presidential elections, has upended everyone's expectations. The global scenario is changing rapidly, and nobody quite knows where we will all end up. These cataclysmic events, as well as ongoing developments such as the continued instability in the Middle East and the unchecked rise of information and communication technology and social media, presents us with an unprecedented set of security challenges. The Asia-Pacific, as the axis of the world and the center of global economic growth, is not immune from these issues. What I propose to do here today is to briefly enumerate what I believe are 5 main challenges as well as how security practitioners and policymakers can confront them moving forward. They are, firstly, the rise of populism and the retreat of globalization. Secondly, the continued threat of Daesh. Thirdly, humanitarian crisis. Fourthly, cybersecurity and fake news. And the fifth, environmental degradation. Allow me to elaborate. Firstly, rise of populism, globalization in retreat. I earlier alluded to the Brexit vote and the outcome of the last US elections. There is a great concern that these populist movements may seek confrontation with rival powers as a way to make their countries great again. The pseudo-nationalism that such beliefs engender in turn revives age-old grouses which are unhelpful impediments in international relations. There is also a tendency on the part of such forces to view important multilateral bodies, including the United Nations, with contempt. It would be very dangerous indeed if such ideas take root among many countries, as it would weaken the global security architecture. This is very worrying when you consider how instrumental the UN and other bodies have been keeping peace in the world post-World War II. There is therefore, ladies and gentlemen, an urgent need for us to ensure that they continue to be viable even in this new global dispensation. Secondly, the continued challenge of Daesh. The challenge posed by radical groups such as the so-called Islamic State or Daesh has not abated, and indeed has become even more severe. It is true that significant territorial gains have been made both in Iraq and Syria in recent months, including in Mosul, Aleppo, and in Raqqa. However, only a fool would believe that we have seen the last of Daesh. We are now confronted by the specter of returned fighters importing their brands of mayhem and terror to their own home shores. Our region, ladies and gentlemen, has not been spared from this trend. Men, women, and even youth from our region have left their homes to join Daesh. There is even a Southeast Asian brigade calling itself the Katibah Nusantara, consisting of roughly 700 fighters from Indonesia, from Malaysia, and Philippines. Our great fear is that Daesh will seek to transform Southeast Asia, our cradle of peace, into its new base of operations as it continues to suffer reversals in the Middle East. There are certainly many fault lines that could be exploited in our region, including the ongoing instability in the southern regions of Thailand and the Philippines, as well as increasingly Myanmar's Rakhine State. And this needs to be looked at. The third challenge, ladies and gentlemen, that I would like to pose this morning is humanitarian crisis. The increasing proliferation of humanitarian crisis in our region is a potential vulnerability. This is a problem that has also been exacerbated by the ongoing and unchecked problems of people smuggling. The 2015 Boat People's Crisis highlights this in a very real way, which challenged our countries in ASEAN. Malaysia is now hosting 56,000 displaced Rohingyas who have fled often from nothing but the clothes on their backs. As Prime Minister Najib recently stated at the extraordinary session of the OIC Council of Foreign Ministers on the situation of Rohingya Muslim minorities in Myanmar just last week, he said, "We fear that if the situation of the Rohingya Muslim minority in the Rakhine State is not properly addressed, militant elements could infiltrate and possibly radicalize the oppressed community." OIC member states are well aware that terrorist organizations such as Daesh could seek to take advantage of this situation. This is a serious concern, not only to Myanmar's neighbors, but also to the region and our partners worldwide in our effort to maintain global peace and stability. This horrific possibility has the potential to cause death and destruction well beyond the borders of ASEAN. The fourth challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is cybersecurity and technology threats. The internet and social media has been the defining invention of our age. There's no doubt about that. It has made communication and the dissemination of ideas easier than ever before. Moreover, new developments such as the Internet of Things has broadened our horizons to an extent that the founders of the Internet could never dream of all these eventualities years ago. There is simply no way for us to turn back the advent of technology. We now live in a world where a disaffected young man with a battered laptop and a strong Wi-Fi connection can cripple critical national infrastructure right from his living room. Also, the IoT has raised very pertinent questions about what we share online and whether the information is truly safe. Furthermore, allegations of foreign interference in the recent US elections highlights how technology can have a political and diplomatic dimension. We cannot also dismiss the fact that the global village has given extremist groups a platform to air their views and to win adherents. We are also increasingly confronted with the threat of fake news that erodes social harmony as well as public confidence in the institutions of the state. Whereas such fake news once took the form of furtively photocopied poisoned pen letters, they now take the shape of seemingly plausible online news stories or chain emails. Just last December, 2 countries with nuclear arsenals were suddenly thrust into the limelight due to the circulation of unverified news. What stated as a hoax on a fake news outlet led to threats of nuclear war between Pakistan and Israel. It was reported that the former Israeli Defense Minister, Moshe Yaalon, was quoted as threatening to destroy Pakistan if it sends troops into Syria. While there was no evidence that Yaalon ever said those words, Pakistan's Defense Minister, Khawaja Asif, responded to the article as if it was real, warning Israel that it was not the only nuclear power in the world. Less than a day later, the Israeli Defense Minister responded on Twitter, notifying Asif that the statement was completely false. However, ladies and gentlemen, that was too late. The hoax remains on Twitter with over 3,000 retweets. Their dispute is the latest case of fake news, peddled by sites and political aims, or simply to earn money from advertising, influencing the real world. This disturbing incident is a clear example how fabricated stories have a serious impact in the real world. Stopping such stories, ladies and gentlemen, to put it mildly, is a difficult proposition in a post-truth world of instant and constant news. The fifth challenge, and the final challenge, is with regards to environmental degradation. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be extremely unwise for us to ignore the impact that natural disasters could have on our security landscape. It was recently reported by NASA that 2016 was the hottest year on record, with new highs of 54 degrees Celsius in some parts of the world. This, if anything, is proof that climate change is real, and those who deny its existence are courting disaster. Climate change can lead to natural disasters. These disasters can lead to famine and the erosion of food security or large-scale human displacement. And this, in turn, can create refugee crisis, which in itself can lead to political instability. Nature, therefore, is a huge security challenge when you consider the chain reactions that it can potentially cause. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is the way forward? The challenges that I have touched upon, as well as the events of 2016 in general, have shown us that the old barriers between traditional and non-traditional security threats have completely melted away. This was already the trend, but occurrences over the last couple of years have accelerated it. Meeting these challenges, therefore, will require us to be bold. We have to be ingenious. Solutions will not come easily, nor will it come overnight. However, let me now share with you some thoughts on how we can do, maybe together, to find a path forward in these uncertain times. Again, I offer 5 of the most compelling. First, a reaffirmed commitment to multilateralism. Secondly, renewed efforts at counter-terrorism. Thirdly, stronger cybersecurity initiatives. Fourthly, sub-regional approaches. And most importantly, the fifth, leadership. On reaffirming commitment to multilateralism, first, ladies and gentlemen, there must be a renewed commitment on the part of all peace-loving countries to the various multilateral security processes, regardless of what happens in certain states. In light of current and potential leadership transitions around the world, it is reasonable to anticipate certain changes to the security outlook and policy of some countries. President Donald Trump has a number of times highlighted the possibility of reducing certain U.S. commitments overseas. While we hope that he will reconsider, given how crucial the Asia-Pacific is to America's security and economy, it is perhaps timely also that ASEAN takes this challenge in filling up the vacuum as a result of certain policy changes that involves the superpowers of the world. For instance, the ADMM and the ADMM Plus framework allows and involves global major and middle powers in addressing the regional defense and security challenges, whilst upholding regional values and regional interests. Indeed, I see both these initiatives as crucial part of ASEAN's regional security architecture, which provides us with the flexibility to address fast evolving challenges in a punishingly complex landscape. The ADMM Plus platform, since its inception, have been critical in addressing various areas of security concern, ranging from maritime security, counter-terrorism, peacekeeping operations, humanitarian and disaster relief, military medicine, humanitarian mine action, and in the pipeline, cyber security. We embarked on the Malacca Straits Patrol, involving Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, which facilitates sea patrols, air surveillance, or the eyes in the skies, and intelligence sharing. The ASEAN Military Ready Group, established under the ADMM mechanism, is one platform that can be explored in forging a practical form of cooperation in HADR. These measures will no doubt help to facilitate integration in our region, regardless of the wider global scenario. Secondly, looking forward, renewed counter-terrorism efforts. The threat of Daesh can only be met via closer cooperation between and within nations. This will require what I would like to call the SEAL approach, S-E-A-L. That is to say, strategy, engagement, anticipation, and leadership. We need strategies to defeat radicalization. We must engage all internal and external stakeholders. We must do a better job at anticipating potential threats, and we urgently need clear-sighted leadership to bring all these things together. Malaysia has its own de-radicalization program under the Royal Malaysian Police, which has garnered the interests of other countries around the world. In addition, Malaysia has been working very closely with Saudi Arabia to form a center of countering the narratives and the ideologies that underpins terrorism and radicalism in Islam. This ties very closely with His Majesty, the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud's inaugural visit to Malaysia next month. Both Malaysia and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have agreed that there is a need to rectify the many misconceptions about Islam and to promote the religion in a holistic manner beyond the mere political dimensions, which led the Muslims to be divided, especially on what constitute to be the Islamic State. At the regional level, we have also successfully conducted the ASEAN Wasatiyah Forum in Kuala Lumpur last year, promoting the concept of moderation in addressing extremism. Indeed, it is heartening to note that all 10 ASEAN defense ministers at the 9th ADMM in Langkawi, Malaysia, made a unanimous declaration to condemn terrorist acts carried out by extremist organizations and terrorist groups. More recently, the resolute commitment made by President Trump in his inaugural speech to battle Islamic extremism, whilst it bolsters our common cause to combat terrorism, it would also, I think, definitely create reactionary forces which may increase the risk of lone wolf attacks or even planned attacks. We must be vigilant of such eventualities and double up our efforts to cripple these vengeful acts of carnage. Defeating extremism will of course not be easy and might well be the cause of our lifetimes. However, I feel we have made a good a start as possible. We will never let the forces of perverted religion and hatred prevail over our hearts and minds. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, is unconventional solutions to combat cyber threats and fake news. There is also a need for us to think outside the box when confronting cyber threats and fake news. Some solutions to this are quite familiar. The Malaysian Armed Forces' very own Cyber Defense Operations Center, ATM CDOC, which was recently launched, will be fully operational by September 2017 this year. This body will monitor cyber threats to our national defense system. The government has also enhanced cybersecurity control of critical national information infrastructure for 10 key sectors, including water, energy, and banking. For my part, I recently launched a cybersecurity awareness campaign in my own Ministry of Defense. I think it is also key that we work more closely with the private sector, the academia, and internet activists to strengthen our capacities with this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, tanks and troops protecting our borders will not mean anything if the technological infrastructure in which these systems are built upon are vulnerable and are prone to attacks. Fourth, sub-regional approaches to security. This is the fourth point in us looking forward. One very exciting possibility is the adoption of issue-driven sub-regional security initiatives. Our approach is always to prioritize ASEAN's centrality. I'm not denying that. However, the reality of our very diverse political systems and foreign policy priorities means that it is sometimes more productive to work via focus caucuses among member states. At the end of the day, these initiatives are fundamentally building blocks towards greater goal of a secure and united ASEAN community. An example of this approach, which I've personally overseen, include my efforts together with the Indonesian and the Philippines counterparts to address the growing threats of diassization in the common maritime areas between our countries. The Trilateral Sulu Sea Initiative will see Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines closely cooperating to provide coordinated naval and air patrols in the waters and areas near the eastern coast of Malaysia. Militant groups in the area have internationalized their operations across boundaries, rejecting existing state identities and allegiances and duplicating Daesh's modus operandi. A united multi-state front comprising a tri-nation military force will shatter any dreams of a utopian state caliphate establishing itself in the region. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, and to me, most importantly, we need leadership. This is a topic that has lately been at the forefront of our minds and is likely to continue in the light of power transitions that we are now witnessing. Every nation has its own criteria in defining what is good and what is necessary in leadership. However, one constant is the need for leaders to be clear-headed and calm. A leader is someone who can keep his head when everyone around them is losing theirs, and at the same time blaming everything on him or her. Leadership is also about listening, but also being firm in your conviction It also calls for compromise, for uplifting your followers rather than pandering to their lowest common denominator. It is an increasingly rare commodity in this day and age, but one which we desperately need more than ever before. Leadership also requires us to respect and play by the rules. As President Dwight Eisenhower, who was both a general and a statesman, once said, "The peace we seek and need means much more than mere absence of war. It means the acceptance of law and the fostering of justice in the world." So, ladies and gentlemen, the new frontiers. I've tried in the limited time available to discuss what I see are the major conundrums confronting us in this brave new world and how we might go ahead in meeting them. I'm not here to prophesize, but merely outline what I see issues which may occupy us in the very, very near future. For a middle power like Malaysia, this emerging global order presents us with dilemmas, but at the same time, it also presents us with opportunities. There is a pressing need for us to finally make progress on long-standing contentious matters like the South China Sea. Whether this progress is for good or ill rests solely on the shoulders of the nations of this region and its external partners. Malaysia, for its part, firmly and unequivocally believes that this dispute can only be resolved through diplomacy and via multilateral institutions such as ASEAN. We must also look beyond tired and childish notions of winners and losers for the simple fact that peace is a universal good and is not a zero-sum game. There has been, as of late, a regrettable tendency to pigeonhole foreign relations in the Asia-Pacific as a series of false dichotomies. We are apparently being forced to choose between East and West, between China or the United States, between liberalism and populism. However, this goes against Asia's unique tradition of pluralism, where different cultures, different faiths, different belief systems were able to coexist and thrive for centuries, securing for us the peace of our time. And it will require us today to regain and enshrine this tradition in everything that we do. Malaysia, whose DNA bears the best trace of moderation and pluralism, will always champion these sentiments in our dealings with the world. So in conclusion this morning, ladies and gentlemen, these months and years ahead will no doubt be lively, if not difficult. The one thing we can depend is that problems will arise. Meeting these problems will require strong and versatile responses. But more importantly, it will also require us to be resolute, requires us to be unified and honest with each other. Let us never forget that we have the future of our children and their children in our hands. We have the power to leave them either destruction or suffering, or peace and harmony. The choice really is ours to make. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening to me this morning, and I wish you a very pleasant session ahead. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. That was great.
Really?
Fantastic. Would you take a few questions?
Of course. More than that.
Minister, thank you so much for that wide-ranging and very rich keynote address in which you highlighted 5 key areas of concern: the rise of populism, the continuing challenges from the so-called Islamic State, humanitarian crisis, threats from threats to cyber security, and also the dangers of environmental degradation. And you identified 5 key ways of responding to that range of security challenges facing the region. You've kindly agreed to take some questions from our Fullerton Forum delegates seated around the table here, and we're very grateful for that. So if any of our delegates would like to raise questions, could you please upend your name boards, and then I'll recognize you, and you'll have the chance to ask your question of the Minister. First, Professor...
Can I have a pen?
Of course.
Thank you.
Wang Dong from China.
Thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much for your very insightful speech. I'm Dong Wang from Peking University in China. In your speech, you also mentioned that a lot of things that happened last year seems to indicate, as many people suggest, that we are now entering into a deglobalization process. But very interestingly, Chinese President Xi Jinping just most recently delivered also a very important speech in Davos, where I think he offered a very forceful defense of globalization. So what I would like to know is that what is your assessment of the sort of trajectory of globalization, and also the implication that what we should be doing and where we should be heading? Thank you.
Thank you. President Xi's statement on globalization also caught me off guard. And it just shows that how uncertain, as we navigate this new year, with regards to beliefs and understanding that we've had in the past. As far as Malaysia and China is concerned, I really need to read up, maybe in Peking University, with regards to what President Xi is actually referring to when he refers to his defense on globalization. And with developments and what is unfolding in the West, if you look at what Merkel is facing, and how France are looking through their elections, I would like to read a bit more, because his statement in Davos is very recent, and I need to know a bit more on what President Xi is referring to. But in my speech, I said with regards to globalization, there is something that we in the Shangri-La dialogue and the Fullerton discussion need to address this year, because now you have statements being made by policymakers of huge influence, promoting something which is non-traditional. So it's still work in progress for me in trying to understand what President Xi meant by supporting globalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Professor Chung-Min Lee from the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Tim. Minister, thank you for your excellent speech. I have 2 questions. One is, in the list of issues that you face in this region, I was very surprised that you didn't really allude to the indispensable role, in my view, of the U.S. forces throughout the Pacific. The U.S. has crucial alliances in the region with Japan, South Korea, Australia, a deepening defense partnership with India, and of course even with your own country. And so my question to you is, how do you see the future prospects of U.S. strategic presence in this region? And my second question is, although you alluded to the South China Sea problem, and of course nobody wants conflict in that region, but do you think that diplomacy will resolve the ongoing dispute in the South China Sea? And if so, what type of roadmap do you envision for this particular issue because it is becoming highly contentious, not only for Southeast Asia, but also for Northeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. On the U.S. forces strategic position in the South China Sea, I left it out deliberately because I'm not quite sure what it is going to be with the new president. So we just have to wait. But our links with Pacific Command, our links with Washington, we continue to engage. But it is, I think, too premature to see what is the focus of the new president and how that will impact on us. And my advice to institutions that already exist, that the institutions that have long ties, military to military, for example, the link up with Pacific Command in Hawaii, for example, as far as Malaysia is concerned, that is still intact. But how are we going to navigate and how what is going to unfold in the next few months will depend very much on the U.S. leadership. And we cannot even attempt to understand how things are going to unfold in the months to come. But it is important for them to spend time to look at it because it affects real lives. We are the ones that are going to be affected. And I always impressed on the Americans and other superpowers in our region that the names that they have on these pieces of papers have lives, have faces, and what has unfolded in the Middle East, and the tragedies that we see in Syria, in Iraq, in Aleppo, in Mosul, that scenario can never be allowed to be replicated here in our region. And that I will put solely and squarely on the shoulders of these superpowers. And I'll be monitoring and I'll be very, very interested to see how things unfold in the future. Now, the South China Sea, my belief, I might be wrong, is something that we in ASEAN has, as I said in my speech, give more emphasis to, Prof. Individually, dealing with superpowers, maybe our countries are too small to be able to decide on what can we do in the future. But together, 10 countries in ASEAN, nobody, not the US, not China, can ignore the destiny and the future of 10 ASEAN countries that are united. And what we need to do is to build on things that unite, things that not on things that divide. So what I mentioned about the 10 countries agreeing to face terrorism and IISS and Daesh is something that we have to build on. The trilateral arrangements between Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia with regards to the Sulu Seas, and the fact that Abu Sayyaf have declared allegiance to IS and Daesh is something that we are building on right now. The Malacca Straits Patrol between Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. These are all bridge building that, if works and expanded, I think we have a better chance on trying to find a solution in the South China Sea.
Thank you, Minister. Richard Hedarian from the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Minister, for a very probing speech. This year, the Philippines will take over the ASEAN as the chairman, and two issues on the table. One is fighting extremism, and the other one is the South China Sea disputes. What are your particular recommendations when it comes to the ASEAN developing a cooperative mechanism in dealing with the issue of Daesh, as Daesh becomes more of a global threat, particularly to Southeast Asia? And what is your assessment of the existing mechanism of cooperation among the three countries that you mentioned? And then on the South China Sea, what do you think about the proposal, since it has been, 15 years of negotiations with China, and people are skeptical about its direction? What do you think about the proposal of ASEAN claimant states themselves first signing a COC. Perhaps Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia could start the process among themselves.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Secretary of Defense will be here in Singapore later today, Secretary Delphin. And basically, this is something that we need to address and to prove to the world that we can do it. Together with Bapak Riyamizat, the Sulu Seas initiative is, to me, an imperative. The intelligence sharing, the joint patrolling, maritime and air, with regards to a common enemy and foe who has very devious plans to establish an Islamic caliphate in our region. How things are going to be translated depends on the different levels of cooperation between between the three ministries of defense, between the three militaries that is ongoing at the moment. We're looking at joint exercises. We are looking at incorporating other third parties, interested parties to come on board, even if not to participate fully, but just as an observer. Our experiences with Singapore and Thailand on the Malacca Straits can also be used as an example of good practice in the Sulu Straits. That is an area that the three of us, Bapak Riyamizat, myself, and Secretary Delphin, have been working very hard on. And I think it is on the right track. What is important is political will and leadership. And for this initiative, we have the mandate and the support of President Duterte, President Jokowi, and Prime Minister Najib. And with that mandate and that leadership, it gives us room to actually find ways and means to deal with them. That is the difficulty, because these terrorists, Abu Sayyaf, and the terrorists that have got these agendas, they don't go by rules and international law. And that is the challenge that we face. The coastlines is huge, the proximity is very close, and the threat, unlike Al-Qaeda, unlike Mat Slamat when it comes to Singapore, when I was in the Home Ministry, unlike Jemaah Islamiyah, the IS threat is a totally different kettle of fish. And if they have a foothold in our region, it will destabilize and raise risks way beyond islands and duplicating claims in the South China Sea. With regards to South China Sea, our approach when it comes to duplicating claims, the DOC and the COC, is in the purview of the Foreign Office. I can only answer for the Ministry of Defense. My biggest concern is unintended accidents in the high seas. Not enough bridges and lines of communication that these unintended accidents or incidents in the high seas spiral out of control. That involves military participation. And that is when we are in a world with real-time communication, is something that concerns us. But thank God, our link up and our trust levels, both with the US and with China, and what I mentioned earlier, the link up with the Southern Command in China and with the Pacific Command in the US, if we have these lines established, to avoid these unintended incidents that may spiral out of control, which leads to emotions, which leads to relations, bilateral relations between two countries, neighbors as well, deteriorate, hopefully will not lead to things which we do not want to see in the future. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of trust, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of give and take.
Minister, thank you very much for responding to those questions so fully and interestingly. I'm afraid that we need very soon to bring these formal proceedings to a close. But
I can see some more people trying to wave at me. Can we just have one?
We can have one more, of course.
Thank you.
One more question.
Tim. Yeah, okay.
David Cappy from New Zealand.
Hi.
Thank you very much, Minister, for some very interesting remarks. You made the comment about the importance of preventing IS from getting an established presence in the region. But also during your speech, you talked about the dangers of an emerging insurgency, perhaps in the Rakhine state,
yes,
and the links there. But you also spent a lot of time in your remarks talking about the humanitarian crisis and the treatment of the Rohingya people. I wonder what lessons or what things you think would be important for the Myanmar government in thinking about dealing with that nascent insurgency in a way that isn't going to provoke a humanitarian crisis or make for difficult relations between ASEAN neighbours.
Now I regret opening up another question. I keep reminding my friends and my colleagues in Myanmar, as I did the leadership in China with regards to treatment of Muslims. My advice to China with regards to the Rohingyas in the Xinjiang Forum, not the Rohingyas, sorry.
Uyghurs.
The Uyghurs. Was about 10 or 14 years ago. The same applies with the Rohingyas in Myanmar. This particular issue is going to test ASEAN's solidarity and centrality. And it's still unfolding right now. The quote that I gave you of my Prime Minister was a quote taken out from a speech that was given by him in an OIC extraordinary meeting only a few days ago. It needs to be resolved. We cannot sweep it under the carpet. It affects a lot of Muslims and it's very emotional. I really do not have any solutions as yet, but I've always believed in the basic good of the people of Southeast Asia, of ASEAN. And if we are able to reach out and really build trust and appeal to them without any ego, without any agenda, without any trying to also understand their position, I believe we have a better chance. The other solution is to actually work together to address a more practical problem, which is the movement of people. As you can see, the refugee problem that Europe faced with the instability in Africa and in the Middle East, if not dealt properly, can bring down governments, whether in Germany or in France, or it will lead to anger. And this lessons for us to learn. But again, we must be very proactive in dealing with it. I personally feel that we have a better chance within ASEAN to talk to the leadership of Myanmar, and together, like I said, sub-regional approaches. People within, whoever in ASEAN who Myanmar feels comfortable with, come in and resolve it. It's a very complex issue. It is not new, but now it has gone international, it's gone global, it's gone religious when it comes to Islam. I'm very, very concerned because situations like this will allow those who want to exploit and destabilize the region to look at this situation as something that they can exploit fully. So Philippines, Mindanao, I'm glad that we are doing something with the Philippines and Indonesia. Southern Thailand is on track, our peace process. But now we've got a Rohingya issue in the Rakhine State, which in a way I'm quite happy that it is being discussed openly. But I'm a bit hesitant in trying to say that I know what is the solution moving forward. But a lot depends very much on the Myanmarese leadership. And that is something that we all need to engage. And a forum like this and the Shangri-La Dialogue, if approached well, understanding their own feelings and understanding the misery that the people have got to face, I think we have a better chance than looking down to them and trying to impose our idea of what the solution is to be. Thank you.
Minister, one more question?
Sure.
Or... Sorry, I can't see the name, but...
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister of Defense. It's a new question for me. I would like to explain about Myanmar. Myanmar, I'm the Deputy Minister of the Minister of Defense, Myanmar. I would like to, it's a new question for me. It is also explanation about our Myanmar-Rakhine issue. I would like to request a little bit explanation about our Myanmar-Rakhine issue. Myanmar is fully aware of the growing concern about the widespread reports on the situation in Rakhine State. The new government is committed to taking all possible measures to address the concerns. The government does not condone right abuse against innocent civilians. Legal action will be taken in response to any substantial claims. The interests of the two communities will be the best served by the focusing on the finding a lasting solution of the issue. Myanmar calls for just fair reporting and for lending support to the new government in its serious efforts to resolve this issue. Allowing time and speed is essential for the government's effort to bear the fruit in finding a substantial solution of this complex issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
I hear you. And if there's any way I personally can help or Malaysia can help in moving forward, let's use the channels that exist to navigate this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you all for your questions. Minister, you have set the scene for this Fullerton Forum extremely well. You have talked not just about the security challenges that we face in this region, but also about potential ways of managing and even resolving some of those challenges. So I think we're hugely indebted to you. I hope you'll be able to join us for the reception briefly upstairs before we commence the main sessions of the forum. But thank you again most sincerely for a fantastic keynote address.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really great.
You think so?
Yes.